I found my stepfather sitting in my dead father's chair at Thanksgiving dinner, and that's when I knew I had to say something. But let me back up, because the chair isn't really the point. The chair is just where it all came to a head. My father died when I was 19. Sudden. A heart attack at 43 while he was coaching my little brother's soccer game. One moment he was yelling encouragement from the sidelines, the next he was on the ground, and then he was gone. Just like that. No warning. No goodbye. No time to prepare for a world without him. My mother was 39 when she became a widow. My brother, Tyler, was only 8. I was in my second year of college, 3 hours away, and I remember the phone call. The way my mom's voice sounded, hollow, broken, like someone had scooped out everything inside her and left just the shell. The funeral was massive. My father had been one of those people everyone loved. Coached Little League, volunteered at the food bank, remembered everyone's names. His family, and God, he had a huge family, came from all over. Aunts, uncles, cousins I'd met maybe twice. His parents, my grandparents, who aged 10 years in the 3 days between his death and his burial. They all held us, me, Tyler, my mom, like we were made of glass. And maybe we were. The first year after he died was a blur. I came home from college almost every weekend. My mom was barely functioning. Tyler was acting out at school, getting into fights, failing classes. I became the adult, the mediator, the one holding everything together while also trying to process my own grief. My father's family was there constantly in those early months. My grandmother came over every Sunday with enough food to last the week. My Uncle Dave fixed things around the house that my dad would have fixed. My Aunt Lisa took Tyler to his soccer games because my mom couldn't bear to watch without breaking down. We were surrounded by Morales family love, and it was the only thing that kept us from falling apart completely. Then my mother met Richard. It was at a grief support group, 14 months after my father died. Richard had lost his wife to cancer 2 years prior. He had no kids. He was quiet, steady, and he made my mother smile for the first time in over a year. I wanted to hate him. Part of me did hate him at first, but he was so careful with us. He didn't try to replace my father. He didn't push. He just existed alongside us. Giving my mother something to hold onto that wasn't just grief and responsibility. They dated for 8 months before he proposed. My mother said yes. I was 21 by then, back at college, trying to build my own life. Tyler was 10 and seemed okay with Richard. Not thrilled, but okay. He called him Richard, not Dad, and Richard never asked him to do otherwise. The wedding was small. Just us, Richard's brother and sister-in-law, and a few of my mother's close friends. Notably absent, my father's entire family. My mother said she didn't want to hurt them by flaunting her new relationship, that it felt disrespectful to invite them to watch her marry someone else so soon after my father's death. That they'd understand. But they didn't understand. Or if they did, they were hurt anyway. My grandmother stopped calling as much. The Sunday dinners tapered off. When I'd visit my father's parents on my own, there was a new tension in the air. They never said anything directly about Richard or my mother's remarriage, but I could feel their disappointment, their sense of betrayal. "How's your mother?" my grandmother would ask, her voice careful and tight. "She's good. Happy." Pause. "That's good. That's good." But her eyes said it wasn't good. It was too soon, too fast, too much like my father had been replaced. Richard moved into our house. The house my father had bought, had painted, had filled with his presence. He was respectful about it. Didn't rearrange everything. Didn't throw out my father's things. But slowly, over months and years, the house started to feel less like my father's and more like Richard's. My father's favorite coffee mug disappeared from the cabinet. His tools in the garage got reorganized. The photos on the walls were gradually supplemented with pictures that included Richard, family vacations, Tyler's graduation from middle school, my college graduation where Richard stood next to my mother, his hand on her shoulder. I told myself it was fine, normal, healthy even. My mother deserved happiness. Richard was a good man. Life moved forward. But my father's family didn't move forward with us. The distance grew. Invitations to Morales family gatherings became less frequent. When I did go, and I made a point to go, to stay connected to my father's side of the family, there were questions. "Does your mother ever ask about us? Why doesn't Tyler come around anymore? We miss you kids. We miss being part of your lives." I didn't know how to explain that my mother had built a new life and that life didn't include them. That Tyler barely remembered the years when Morales' family was central to our existence. That I was caught in the middle, loving them but also loving my mother and not knowing how to bridge the gap. Years passed. I graduated college, started a career, got engaged to my girlfriend Emma. Tyler went to high school, then college. Richard was just there, part of the family, part of our lives. Not my father, never my father, but something adjacent. A stepfather in the most literal sense. My mother seemed genuinely happy. That was worth something, I told myself. Then came the Thanksgiving that changed everything. I was 27. Emma and I had been engaged for 6 months. We were planning a wedding for the following fall, and the guest list was becoming a source of intense anxiety. My mother assumed Richard would be invited. Obviously, he was her husband. He'd been part of the family for 6 years at that point. But I also wanted my father's family there. My grandparents, now in their 70s. My uncles and aunts. My cousins. The people who'd held me together when my father died. The people who represented him, his memory, his legacy. They won't come if Richard is there, Emma said gently one night as we were addressing Save the Dates. You don't know that. Babe, come on. You've told me how weird things have been. How they feel about your mom remarrying. That was years ago. Surely they're over it by now. But I didn't believe that. I could hear the doubt in my own voice. I decided to test the waters. Called my grandmother and mentioned the wedding. Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful, she said, her voice warm. We'd love to be there. Great. I'll send you guys a formal invitation once we have all the details. Will your mother be there? Strange question. Of course. She's my mother. And her husband? There it was. The tension. The unspoken thing we'd been dancing around for 6 years. Richard? Yes. He'll be there. Silence. Long and heavy. Grandma. We'll have to see, she said finally. Your grandfather's health hasn't been great. Travel is hard for us. My grandfather had run a marathon last year. He was fine. Grandma, please. This is my wedding. I want you there. I want all of you there. We'll see, Mija. We'll see. I hung up feeling like I'd been punched. Emma found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. They won't come, I said. Did they say that? Not in so many words, but yes, they won't come if Richard is there. So what are you going to do? I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know. The issue came to a head at Thanksgiving 3 weeks later. My mother was hosting. Richard would be there. Tyler was coming home from college. And I'd made the mistake, the terrible, stupid mistake, of mentioning to my mother that maybe we should invite my father's parents. Why would we do that? My mother asked, genuinely confused. Because they're my grandparents. Because it's Thanksgiving. Because we used to always spend holidays together. That was before. Before what? Before Dad died? Before you remarried? They're still my family, Mom. And Richard is my family now. Our family. I'm not going to make him feel uncomfortable in his own home by inviting people who've made it clear they don't accept our marriage. They've never said that. They don't have to say it. It's obvious. They stopped calling, stopped visiting, made excuses every time I reached out. I got the message. Maybe because you got remarried without even telling them, without including them. You just cut them out. My mother's face went tight. I didn't cut anyone out. I moved on with my life. There's a difference. Not to them. Well, maybe they should have tried harder to stay in our lives then. Maybe they should have been there for us instead of judging me for finding happiness again. They were there for us. For an entire year after Dad died. They were there constantly. And then they disappeared when I started dating Richard. That says everything about them, doesn't it? I wanted to argue, but I wasn't sure she was entirely wrong. The Morales family had pulled back. But my mother had also made it clear, in subtle and not so subtle ways, that Richard was her priority now. That the past was the past. Fine, I said. No grandparents at Thanksgiving. But they're coming to my wedding. And Richard will just have to deal with being in the same room as them for a few hours. Of course they're invited to your wedding. I never said they weren't. But you're making it impossible for them to come. I'm not making anything impossible. If they choose not to come because they can't handle seeing me happy with someone else, That's their choice. Not mine. Thanksgiving dinner was tense. Richard tried to make conversation. Tyler was oblivious, just happy to be home and eating my mother's cooking. Emma kept giving me worried looks from across the table. And then, after dinner, we all moved to the living room. My mother gestured to seats, and Richard sat down in my father's chair. The leather recliner in the corner. The one my father had bought the year before he died. The one he'd fall asleep in watching football games. The one that still, after all these years, felt like it belonged to him. Richard sat in it like it was nothing, like it was just a chair. My mother sat on the arm of it, her hand on Richard's shoulder, and asked if anyone wanted more pie. Couldn't breathe. It was just a chair. I knew it was just a chair. My father had been dead for 8 years. Richard had been part of our family for 6. It was just a chair. But it wasn't. It was my father's chair. And seeing Richard in it, seeing my mother comfortable with him in it, seeing them inhabit the space my father used to occupy, it broke something in me. I don't want Richard at Dad's family events, I said. Everyone stopped. Tyler looked up from his phone. Emma's eyes went wide. My mother stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. What? My mother said. I don't want Richard at events with Dad's family. Not the wedding. Not if I have kids and there are baptisms or birthdays. Not at anything involving the Morales family. That's ridiculous, my mother said. Richard is family. He's your family. He's not a Morales. And having him there makes it impossible for Dad's actual family to participate. Richard stood up. Maybe I should. No, my mother said sharply. You're not going anywhere. This is our home. She turned to me. I cannot believe you would say something like this. Richard has been nothing but good to you, to all of us, and you want to exclude him from your wedding. I want Dad's parents at my wedding. I want his siblings there. I want to stay connected to that side of my family, and they won't come if he's there. Then that's their problem. No, Mom, it's our problem. You created this situation by cutting them out. I didn't cut anyone out, and now I'm stuck in the middle. I'm about to get married and I have to choose between my stepfather and my actual father's entire family. Your father is dead. My mother's voice was cold, sharp. He's been dead for 8 years, and Richard is here. Richard has been here, showing up, being present, being a father figure when you needed one. I never needed him to be my father. I had a father. I still have a father, even if he's gone. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. Richard finally spoke up. Maybe she's right, he said quietly. My mother whirled on him. Don't you dare take her side. I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying, I understand where she's coming from. Your husband's family has never accepted me. I've known that. I've lived with that. Maybe it's better if I'm not at events where they're present. No, absolutely not. You're my husband. You're part of this family. If they can't accept that, then they don't need to be part of our lives. Mom, I said, my voice breaking. They're the only connection I have left to Dad. I'm your connection to your dad. Tyler is your connection. Your memories are your connection. You don't need his family for that. But I do. I do need them. When I'm with them, when I hear them tell stories about when Dad was young, when I see his mannerisms in my cousins, when my grandfather laughs and sounds exactly like Dad, that's when he feels real to me. Not gone. Not replaced. Real. Richard hasn't replaced anyone. Hasn't he? I looked at Richard sitting in my father's chair. At my mother, defensive and angry. At Tyler, who looked confused because he barely remembered what life was like before Richard. This was Dad's house. That was his chair. Those were his kids. His wife. His life. And now it's Richard's. How is that not replacement? Because life goes on, my mother shouted. Because people die and the rest of us have to keep living. Because I was 39 years old when your father died and I couldn't just stop existing. I couldn't be alone forever. I never asked you to be alone. I just asked you not to erase him. I haven't erased him. You removed all his photos from the main rooms. His clothes are gone. His chair is Richard's now. His tools, his books, his coffee mug. Where are they, Mom? Where's Dad in this house? In here. She pressed her hand to her chest. In my heart. In my memories. That's where he is. That's not enough. Not for me. Not for his family. Then maybe his family needs to learn to let go. Maybe you let go too fast. The silence that followed was devastating. My mother's face crumpled. Richard looked stricken. Tyler got up and left the room without a word. Emma reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Get out," my mother said quietly. "Mom, get out of my house. If you can't respect my marriage, if you can't respect Richard, then I don't want you here. Mom, please, out, now." Emma and I left. We sat in the car in the driveway for 10 minutes, neither of us speaking. I could see the living room window, see shadows moving behind the curtains. My family, fractured and broken, trying to figure out what to do with the grenade I'd just thrown. "Did I just ruin Thanksgiving?" I asked. "You said what you've been feeling," Emma said carefully. "Maybe not the best timing, but not wrong. She kicked me out. She's hurt. Give her time. But would time fix this? Or had I just made everything worse?" My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "What the hell was that?" Then another from my mother. "When you're ready to apologize to Richard, you can come back. Not before." Then another. This one from Richard himself. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to cause problems in your family." I stared at that message for a long time. Richard apologizing. Richard who'd done nothing wrong except exist. Except marry my mother. Except try to build a life with us. Was I the asshole? Was I being unfair? Or was I just finally saying what needed to be said? I called my grandmother. She picked up on the second ring. "Mija, isn't it Thanksgiving? Shouldn't you be with your mother?" I was. I left. We had a fight. About what? And I told her. Everything. The chair. Richard. The wedding. My mother's refusal to include the Morales family. My demand that Richard not come to family events. My grandmother was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Mija," she said finally, "this isn't about Richard." "What?" "This isn't about Richard or the chair or even the wedding. This is about grief. Yours, your mother's, ours. We're all still grieving your father, but we're doing it in different ways. I know that, but your mother had to move on. She had 2 children to raise alone. She was drowning. If Richard helped her swim, we can't blame her for that, even if it hurt us to watch. So I'm wrong? I should apologize." I didn't say that. I said this isn't about Richard. It's about the fact that your mother's moving on feels like forgetting. And we, your grandfather and I and all of us, we don't want your father to be forgotten. I don't either. I know. But Mija, your father isn't in that house anymore. He's not in the chair or the photos or the things. He's in you. He's in Tyler. He's in the way you laugh and the way you love and the way you stand up for what you believe in, even when it's hard. That's where your father lives now. Grandma, I want you at my wedding. All of you. But if Mom insists Richard comes, and you won't come if he's there, let me talk to your grandfather. Let me talk to the family. We've been holding on to hurt for a long time. Maybe it's time to let some of it go. What does that mean? It means we love you. And if being at your wedding means being in the same room as Richard for a few hours, maybe we can do that. For you." I started crying. Didn't realize I was going to until the tears were already falling. "Thank you," I whispered. "But Mija, you need to apologize to your mother. Not for wanting us there, but for how you said it. For doing it in front of everyone. For making Richard feel unwelcome in his own home. That part was wrong. She was right. I knew she was right. I didn't go back that night. Or the next day. I needed time. Space. Emma and I stayed at my apartment, ordered Chinese food, and spent Black Friday watching movies and not talking about my disaster of a family. On Saturday, my mother called. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Yes." "Not on the phone. Can you come over?" Richard wasn't there when I arrived. Mom said he'd gone to his brother's to give us space. We sat at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between us, and my mother looked older than I'd ever seen her. "I've been thinking about what you said," she started. "About erasing your father. And you're right. Not completely right, but not completely wrong either." "Mom, let me finish. When your father died, I thought I would die too. The grief was so big, so consuming, I didn't know how to exist inside it. And I had you and Tyler depending on me. Couldn't fall apart. Couldn't stop. So I pushed through. And then I met Richard, and he was the first thing in 2 years that didn't hurt. The first person I could talk to who didn't look at me with pity. Who didn't just see me as a widow. I understand that. Do you? Because I don't think you do. You were 19 when your father died. You had your whole life ahead of you. You could grieve and then move forward and build something new. But I was 40. I'd built my entire adult life with your father. Everything I'd planned, died with him. Richard gave me a chance to be something other than a widow. To be a person again. A woman. A wife. Not just a ghost living in a dead man's house. You were never a ghost. Yes, I was. For a long time, I was. And Richard helped me come back to life. So when you ask me to exclude him, to separate him from family events, to treat him like he's less than, it feels like you're asking me to go back to being that ghost. To pretend the last 6 years didn't happen. To act like Richard isn't the reason I'm still here, still functioning, still able to be your mother. The weight of that settled over me. The realization that I'd been so focused on preserving my father's memory that I hadn't considered what my mother needed to survive. I'm sorry, I said, for how I said it, for doing it in front of everyone, for making Richard feel unwelcome. That was wrong. But not for what you said? I don't know. I still want Dad's family at my wedding. I still want to maintain those relationships. And I know it's complicated with Richard there, but Grandma says they'll try. They'll come. They'll be civil. Did you tell them not to come if they couldn't handle Richard being there? No. I told them the situation, and Grandma said they'd work on it. My mother nodded slowly. Okay, that's fair. But I need you to understand something. Richard isn't going anywhere. He's my husband. He's part of this family. And while I understand your father's family's hesitation, I won't allow Richard to be treated as less than or excluded from major family events. Not for anyone. Even if it means Dad's family won't come? Even then, I've chosen Richard. I chose him 6 years ago, and I'm choosing him now. I wish I could make everyone happy, but I can't. So I'm choosing the person who's here, present, alive, and committed to me. It hurt. God, it hurt to hear her say that. But I also understood it. What about the chair? I asked quietly. What about it? It was Dad's chair. It's a chair. It's furniture. Your father is dead. The chair is just a chair. Not to me. She reached across the table and took my hand. Mija, your father is gone. I will always love him. He gave me you and Tyler, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. But he's gone, and I can't live the rest of my life preserving everything exactly as it was. I have to move forward. We all do. What if moving forward feels like forgetting? Then you remember. You tell stories. You keep his memory alive in your way. But you don't ask me to stay stuck in the past. That's not fair to me. Or to Richard. We talked for hours. About my father, about Richard, about grief and memory and family. It wasn't a perfect conversation. We didn't solve everything. But it was honest in a way we hadn't been in years. As I was leaving, my mother hugged me tight. I love you, she said. Always. Even when we disagree. Even when things are hard. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that. I love you too, and I hope you'll find a way to accept Richard, not as your father. He could never be that, but as someone who loves your mother and who's trying his best to be part of this family. I'll try. That was all I could promise. A try. The wedding planning continued. My grandmother was true to her word. She rallied the Morales family, explained the situation, asked them to put aside old hurts for one day. Not everyone agreed to come. Some of my father's cousins declined. One of his brothers said he couldn't make it, though everyone knew it was because of Richard. But my grandparents would be there. My Uncle Dave and Aunt Lisa. Most of my cousins. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Richard sent me a message a few weeks before the wedding. I know I'll never be your father. I don't want to be, but I hope someday we can be friends. Or at least friendly. Your mother loves you so much, and I want to support that relationship however I can. I read that message a dozen times. Then I called him. Richard. Yes. Thank you for that message. And for understanding. Of course. I'm sorry I made you feel unwelcome. That wasn't fair. You were protecting your father's memory. I understand that. But you've been good to my mother. and to Tyler. And you've tried with me even when I made it hard. That deserves respect. I appreciate that. At the wedding, there's a dance after the father-daughter dance. For stepfathers. If you want, it wouldn't be the same as the father-daughter dance. That's for my dad. My memory of him. But if you want to dance with me after, to represent who you are to our family now, I'd like that. His voice was thick when he answered. I'd be honored. The wedding was beautiful. My grandparents came. They were stiff around Richard at first, polite but distant. But as the night went on, as they watched him care for my mother, watched him make her laugh, watched him exist as a real person rather than just a symbol of replacement, something shifted. After the stepfather-daughter dance, my grandfather approached Richard at the bar. I watched from across the room as they talked. Couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw my grandfather extend his hand. Saw Richard shake it. Saw something pass between them, not friendship maybe, but acknowledgement. Acceptance. My grandmother found me later, tears in her eyes. Your father would be proud of you, she said, for building bridges, for trying to keep everyone together. I almost tore everyone apart. But you didn't. You're doing what your father always did, making sure everyone feels included, even when it's complicated. I wore my mother's ring on my right hand during the ceremony, the ring my father had given her when they got engaged. She'd given it to me months earlier, saying she didn't need it anymore, but maybe I'd want to carry that connection. I did. I wanted to carry all of it. My father's memory, my mother's resilience, Richard's kindness, my family's capacity for forgiveness. It wasn't perfect. Family never is. But it was ours, complicated and messy and real. 3 years later, when Emma and I had our first child, we named her Julia Marie, after my mother and my grandmother. At the hospital, my mother held her granddaughter while Richard stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. My grandparents were there too. They cooed over Julia, remarked on how she had my father's nose, my mother's eyes. And Richard? He stood back, giving them space, understanding that some moments belonged to the Morales family. But he was there, part of it, included. Later, I found him in the waiting room. Thank you, I said, for understanding, for giving them space, for being patient all these years. Your father's family loves you, he said simply. I'd never want to get in the way of that. You're part of her family too, you know, Julia's. You'll be her grandfather, step-grandfather. Does it matter? She'll love you either way. He smiled. I hope so, as I held my daughter that night, surrounded by family. Both blood and chosen, past and present, complicated and imperfect. I thought about that Thanksgiving 3 years ago. The fight, the hurt, the terrible things said. Was I the asshole for not wanting Richard at my father's family events? Maybe. A little. In the way I said it, definitely. But maybe I was also right to fight for those connections. To insist on space for my father's memory even while making room for Richard's presence. Life isn't either or. It's an my father and Richard, my past and my future, grief and joy, memory and growth. I'm still figuring out how to balance it all. Still learning, still making mistakes, but I'm trying. And sometimes trying is enough. My mother was right about one thing, the chair was just a chair. My father wasn't in the furniture or the photos or the house. He was in me, in Tyler, in Julia, who would never meet him but would know him through our stories. He was in the way I loved fiercely and stood up for what I believed in and tried to hold my fractured family together. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Richard never sat in that chair again, by the way. Without anyone saying anything, without any rules being made, it just became understood. That was my father's chair. It's the little things that matter. The compromises. The unspoken understandings. That's how families survive. How they grow. How they make room for grief and love and all the complicated things in between. So no, I don't think I was the asshole. Or maybe I was, but in a way that was necessary. In a way that opened up conversations that needed to happen. Either way, we're still here. Still trying. Still family. And that's what my father would have wanted most. 6 months after Julia was born, my grandfather had a stroke. It happened on a Tuesday morning. He was in the garden, my grandmother said, pruning his rose bushes, the ones he'd been cultivating for 30 years. One moment he was standing, the next he was on the ground, the pruning shears still in his hand. My grandmother called 911, then called my Uncle Dave, who called me. I was at work when my phone rang. I just come back from maternity leave 2 months earlier, was still figuring out the impossible balance of being a mother and an employee and a person. Emma had Julia at home. We were tag teaming, exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline and the strange euphoria of new parenthood. "Your grandfather's in the hospital," Uncle Dave said without preamble. "Stroke. It's bad." I left work immediately, called Emma from the car, told her to meet me at the hospital with Julia. Called my mother, called Tyler, who was finishing up grad school 3 states away. And then, without thinking about it, without questioning it, I called Richard. "I'm on my way to the hospital," I said when he answered. "My grandfather. He had a stroke. I'm so sorry. What do you need?" "I don't know. I wanted someone to know. Mom's meeting me there, but she's 40 minutes away and I'm scared and I don't want to be alone when I get there. I'm 20 minutes from that hospital. I'll meet you." "You don't have to." "I'll meet you," he said firmly and hung up. He was waiting in the parking lot when I arrived, still in his work clothes, slightly out of breath like he'd run from his car. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug, and I broke down in a way I hadn't let myself do on the phone or in the car. "He can't die," I sobbed into Richard's shoulder. "Not yet. Julia just got here. He has to meet her, really meet her, not just hold her once in the hospital." I know. My mother arrived next, then Emma with Julia. Uncle Dave was already inside with my grandmother. Aunt Lisa was on her way. The waiting room filled with Morales family. All of us scared and silent and trying not to imagine a world without the patriarch who'd held us all together. Richard stayed. He didn't ask if he should. He just stayed, sitting quietly in the corner, getting coffee for people, holding Julia when Emma's arms got tired, being present without demanding attention. My grandmother emerged from the ICU 3 hours later, her face gray with exhaustion and fear. "He's alive," she said. "They don't know how much damage yet. They won't know for days, maybe weeks, but he's alive." We all exhaled as one. Over the next week, we took turns at the hospital. My grandmother practically lived there. Uncle Dave and Aunt Lisa coordinated schedules, made sure someone was always with her. I came every day after work, sometimes with Julia, sometimes without. And Richard came too. Not every day, not intrusively, but regularly. He'd bring food for my grandmother, who kept forgetting to eat. He'd sit with my Uncle Dave in the cafeteria and just listen while Dave processed his fear of losing his father. He'd hold Julia in the waiting room so Emma and I could both go in to see my grandfather. One evening, I found Richard sitting alone in the chapel. He wasn't praying, he wasn't religious, just sitting in the quiet. "You okay?" I asked, sliding into the pew next to him. "I was just thinking about your father," he said. I stiffened instinctively, but he continued before I could say anything. "When I married your mother, I knew I was marrying into a family that had experienced tremendous loss. I knew your father's shadow would always be there, and that was okay. I never wanted to replace him, but I also never really understood the full weight of that loss. Not until now." "What do you mean?" "Your grandfather, he's not my family. Not really. But watching all of you this week, watching how scared you are, how much you love him, how desperately you're trying to hold on to him, I understand now what you lost when your father died, and what your mother lost, and why it was so hard for you when she moved on. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for not understanding sooner. For any time I made it harder, for taking up space in your family when you were still grieving the person who used to fill it." "Richard, let me finish. I love your mother. I'll always be grateful she gave me a chance. But I also know that my presence has been painful for you sometimes, and I'm sorry for that. I wish I knew how to love her without causing you pain. You don't cause me pain. Not anymore. Maybe at first, but not now." No. "You make my mother happy. You've been good to Tyler. You're kind to my father's family even when they're not always kind to you. And you're here, in this hospital, supporting people who've never fully accepted you. That's not someone who causes pain. That's someone who heals it." His eyes were wet when he looked at me. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. And Richard, when I called you from the car that day, You were the third person I called, after my mother and Tyler. That means something. It does. It means you're family, really family, not just my mother's husband, not just the man who lives in my father's house. Family. We sat in silence for a while, in that quiet chapel, and something settled between us. Something that had been unsettled for 6 years. My grandfather survived the stroke, but he was changed. The left side of his body was partially paralyzed. His speech was slurred. He needed help with things he'd been doing independently for 74 years. My grandmother aged overnight trying to care for him. She wouldn't accept help at first, too proud, too used to being the strong one. But eventually, exhaustion won out. "We need to talk about moving them," Uncle Dave said at a family meeting 2 months after the stroke. "They can't live alone anymore. Not safely." "Where would they go?" Aunt Lisa asked. "Assisted living. Or one of us takes them in." Silence. Everyone looked at their hands, their phones, anywhere but at each other. Uncle Dave and Aunt Lisa had 3 teenagers and no spare room. My cousin Maria was in an apartment. My cousin James lived across the country. Tyler was still in grad school. That left me, or my mother. "I can't," I said immediately, feeling guilty even as I said it. "I have a 3-month-old. I'm back at work. Emma and I are barely keeping our heads above water as it is." "I know," Uncle Dave said. "I wasn't suggesting. They could come stay with us," my mother said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "You're serious?" I asked. "We have space. The house is too big for just Richard and me now that you kids are grown. We could convert the downstairs office into a bedroom, put in safety rails, make it work." "Mom, that's a huge commitment." "I know, but they're your father's parents. They took care of me after he died. It's the least I can do." "What does Richard think?" Uncle Dave asked carefully. Everyone looked uncomfortable. Even now, even after 6 years, invoking Richard's opinion in Morales' family decisions felt fraught. "I haven't asked him yet," my mother admitted. "But I will. Tonight." She called me the next morning. "Richard said yes. Just like that. Just like that. He said if it's important to me, it's important to him." "Mom, having 2 elderly people move in, one of whom is recovering from a stroke, that's not a small thing. That's going to completely change your life." "I know, but it's the right thing to do." My grandmother cried when we told her. "I can't ask you to do that," she said to my mother. "Not after everything." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "But Richard wants to help. We both do. I don't understand. We haven't been kind to him. We haven't welcomed him. Why would he do this?" My mother took my grandmother's hands. "Because family takes care of family, even when it's complicated, even when there's history. You taught me that when you took care of me after my husband died. Let me return the favor." They moved in 3 weeks later. Uncle Dave and I helped pack up the house my grandparents had lived in for 43 years. Every room held memories. Every object had a story. "Your father proposed to your mother in this kitchen," my grandmother said, running her hand over the counter. "He'd made dinner. Terrible dinner. He was a horrible cook. And he got down on one knee right there by the refrigerator. I'd heard the story 100 times, but I wanted to hear it again. Wanted to hold on to every detail, every memory, every piece of my father that still existed in the world." "Tell me again," I said. "What did he say?" My grandmother smiled. "He said, 'I'm not good at fancy speeches, but I know I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?' And your mother said yes before he even finished the question. Did you know that they were going to get married?" "Oh, we knew. He'd asked your grandfather for permission weeks before. Very traditional, your father. Very respectful." "What did Grandpa say?" "He said, 'That girl is the best thing that ever happened to you. Don't screw it up.'" We both laughed, even though my grandfather was in the other room, struggling to help pack, his left arm hanging useless at his side. The move was hard on him. He'd been independent his whole life, and now he was dependent on my mother, his son's widow, who'd remarried another man. The indignity of it was almost worse than the physical limitations. But Richard was patient, more patient than anyone had a right to be. He installed safety rails in the bathroom, learned how to help my grandfather in and out of bed, drove him to physical therapy 3 times a week, sat with him during baseball games, explaining plays when my grandfather's stroke-slurred speech made it hard for him to follow the action. "I don't understand him," my grandfather said to me one day. I'd come to visit, found him on the back porch with Richard, both of them drinking coffee in companionable silence. "Understand who? Richard. Why is he doing this? I haven't been kind to him. Maybe that's exactly why. Maybe he's showing you who he is." "I was wrong about him," my grandfather said quietly. "I thought he was trying to replace your father, trying to take his place. But he's not, is he?" "No, he's not. He's just a man who loves your mother and is trying to do right by her family." "Yes, your father would approve," my grandfather said, and that was the highest compliment he could give. "He'd want your mother to be taken care of. He'd want you and Tyler to have someone stable in your lives. He'd like Richard." "You think." "I know. Your father always said the measure of a man isn't how he treats people who can do something for him, but how he treats people who can't. Richard doesn't need anything from us. We've given him nothing but coldness and suspicion, and he's still here helping, caring, showing up. That's the measure of a good man." I went inside and found Richard in the kitchen, making lunch for my grandmother, who was napping. "Grandpa thinks my dad would have liked you," I said. Richard looked up, surprised. "He said that just now, and he's right. My dad would have liked you, would have respected you, would have been grateful that you take such good care of his family." Richard's eyes got suspiciously bright. "That means more than you know." "I know it does. That's why I'm telling you." Over the next year, something beautiful happened. My grandparents, living in my mother's house, seeing her daily life with Richard, watching how they interacted, began to truly accept him. Not just tolerate, accept. My grandmother and Richard developed a strange friendship. They'd watch cooking shows together, argue good-naturedly about techniques. She taught him how to make my father's favorite dishes, the ones my mother had stopped making after he died because they hurt too much. "Your father loved this picadillo," my grandmother said one evening, teaching Richard the recipe. "He'd eat it 3 times a week if I let him." "Tell me more about him," Richard said. "I want to know. I want to understand who he was." And my grandmother did. She told stories, lots of stories. Stories I'd heard and stories I hadn't. And Richard listened, really listened, honoring my father's memory in a way that felt genuine and kind. One evening, I came over for dinner and found them looking at old photo albums together. This was at his high school graduation, my grandmother was saying, pointing to a picture of my father in his cap and gown, grinning at the camera. He was so proud. First person in our family to finish high school. Richard studied the photo. "He looks like Tyler, doesn't he? Same smile, same eyes. And this," Richard pointed to another photo. "His wedding day. Your mother was so beautiful. They were so young, so in love." I remember thinking, this is what happiness looks like. I expected it to be painful watching Richard look at photos of my mother's first wedding, but it wasn't. It was healing somehow, like we were finally acknowledging that both marriages could exist. That loving Richard didn't mean forgetting my father. "Can I tell you something?" my grandmother said to Richard. "Something I've wanted to say for a long time but didn't know how?" "Of course. I'm sorry. For how I treated you. For how we all treated you. You didn't deserve that. You were protecting your son's memory. I understand. But we were hurting you. And hurting our relationship with your wife and our grandchildren. That wasn't protecting anyone. That was just fear." "Fear of what?" "Fear that if we accepted you, it meant we were okay with him being gone. That we were ready to move on when we weren't. That accepting you meant forgetting him. And now I realize that you and he aren't in competition. He's gone. But he's still part of this family through his children and his memories. And you're here, living, caring for all of us. There's room for both." Richard wiped his eyes. "Thank you for saying that. Thank you for being patient while we figured it out." Julia's first birthday party was at my mother's house. The whole family came, Morales' side and my mother's side and Richard's small family. The house was packed with people, 3 generations, complicated relationships that had somehow knit themselves into something resembling wholeness. I watched my grandfather, walking better now after a year of physical therapy. Teach Julia to clap her hands. Watched my grandmother ice the cake she'd made, my mother's recipe that Richard had helped her prepare. Watched Uncle Dave and Richard talking easily in the corner. No tension, just two men who'd become friends through circumstance and choice. Tyler came home for the party, brought his girlfriend Sarah. He was getting his PhD in chemistry, was planning to propose to Sarah soon, he told me privately. He pulled me aside during the party. "Remember that Thanksgiving?" he asked. "When you and Mom had that huge fight about Richard? How could I forget? I was so angry at you. I thought you were being unfair, cruel even. I loved Richard. He'd been the only father figure I really knew. I was only 8 when Dad died. I barely remembered him. I know, but I get it now. What you were fighting for. You were trying to keep Dad's family connected to us, trying to make sure he wasn't forgotten. And if you hadn't done that, hadn't pushed back, hadn't insisted on maintaining those relationships, Grandma and Grandpa wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't have this." He gestured to the party, the family, the celebration. "I almost destroyed everything." "No. You almost lost everything, but you didn't. You fought for it. And you made space for Richard at the same time. That took guts. I was terrified, but you did it anyway. That's what Dad would have done." After the party, after everyone had gone home except my grandparents who lived there now, I stayed to help clean up. Julia had fallen asleep on Richard's shoulder, and he was swaying gently, keeping her asleep. "You're good at that," I said. "She's easy, peaceful. You know, when Mom first married you, I couldn't imagine ever having kids and you being their grandfather. It felt like a betrayal of my dad somehow. And now I can't imagine it any other way. You're Grandpa Richard, and that's different from what my dad would have been, but it's not less. It's just different. I never wanted to replace him. I know, but I think for a long time I needed someone to blame for the fact that he was gone. And you were there, taking up space in his house, loving his wife, existing in a life that should have been his. It wasn't fair to you. Grief isn't fair. No, but I should have been kinder. I should have seen who you really were instead of just seeing you as the person who wasn't my dad. You were protecting his memory. There's no shame in that. Maybe, but I'm glad we got here. To this place where you can hold my daughter and it doesn't hurt. Where my grandparents live in this house and it doesn't feel like a betrayal. Where we're all just family, messy and complicated and real." Emma came downstairs from putting Julia's diaper bag in the nursery my mother had set up for visits. "Ready to go?" she asked. "Yeah, just saying good night." Richard carefully transferred Julia to Emma's arms. "Thank you for including me in this. In all of this. It means everything." "You're not included," I said. "You're essential. There's a difference." Driving home that night, Emma reached over and took my hand. "You know what I was thinking about today?" she asked. "What?" "How different things could have been if you hadn't fought for your dad's family at our wedding. If you'd just let them drift away. If you'd accepted the distance. Sometimes I wonder if I made things harder by fighting. Maybe in the moment, but look at what you built. Julia has 2 sets of grandparents who love her. Your mom has her in-laws living with her and they're happy. Richard has become part of the Morales family. Your dad's memory is alive and honored. And it's all because you refused to choose. You insisted on both and instead of either or. It wasn't easy. The best things never are. 2 years later, my grandfather died. Not from another stroke, but peacefully in his sleep. My grandmother woke up next to him. They'd been sharing a bedroom in my mother's house, and he was simply gone. The funeral was enormous. The Morales family came out in force, plus my mother's friends, Richard's family, people from the neighborhood, my father's old co-workers who remembered his parents. Richard gave a eulogy. Nobody had asked him to, but he volunteered and my grandmother said yes. "I didn't know Victor Morales long," Richard said from the pulpit. "Only 4 years. But in that time, he taught me something important. He taught me that family isn't about blood or history or who was there first. Family is about showing up. It's about choosing each other, day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He told the story of my grandfather teaching him to prune rose bushes, of watching baseball games together, of my grandfather's patient instruction on how to make proper Cuban coffee. "Victor lost his son too young," Richard continued, "and then his son's wife remarried, and a stranger moved into the house where his son's children lived. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. How painful. How much it must have felt like betrayal. The church was silent. But Victor made a choice. He chose connection over resentment. He chose to know me rather than reject me. And in doing so, he gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. He accepted me into his family. He made room for me in a space where I thought there'd never be room. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that gift. My grandmother was crying. My mother was crying. I was crying. Even Uncle Dave, stoic Dave who never showed emotion, had tears running down his face. After the funeral, at the reception, Uncle Dave pulled Richard aside. I was close enough to hear. "You're one of us now," Dave said. "Officially, permanently, you're a Morales."
I'm honored. No.
"We're honored. My brother chose well when he married their mother. But she chose well too. He'd be glad you're taking care of his family." Richard broke down then, sobbing in my uncle's arms. Years of uncertainty and insecurity and not quite belonging finally releasing. My grandmother moved into a smaller place after my grandfather died. She didn't want to stay in my mother's house without him, needed her own space to grieve. But she came over for Sunday dinners. Always, every single week. And Richard was there, setting a place for her, making sure she felt welcome, honoring the tradition my father had started decades ago. Julia grew. Tyler got married. Sarah said yes, as we all knew she would. They had a son 2 years later, named Victor after my grandfather and my father. My father's name carried forward into a new generation. At Victor's baptism, Richard stood as godfather. My grandmother, now in her 80s, held the baby and whispered stories about the 2 Victors who'd come before him. "Your great-grandfather was a good man," she told baby Victor. "And your grandfather, my son, who you're named after, he was good too. Strong and kind and full of love. You carry their name, Mijo. That means something." Then she handed the baby to Richard. "Take care of him. Teach him. Tell him about the men whose name he carries. Make sure he knows where he comes from." "I will," Richard promised. "I'll make sure he knows his history, his family, all of it." "You're a good man," my grandmother said. "My son would have liked you. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. Better late than never." Yes, better late than never. Emma and I had 2 more children over the next few years. 2 boys, William and Marcus. My mother's house became the center of our family gatherings. Birthdays, holidays, random Tuesdays when we just wanted to be together. Julia, now 6, would sit on Richard's lap and demand stories. He'd tell her about my father, stories my grandmother had told him, stories my mother remembered, stories he'd pieced together from photos and family lore. "Your grandfather, your mom's dad, was brave," Richard would tell her. "He wasn't afraid of anything." "Were you afraid of him?" Julia asked once. "Afraid of him? No, but I was afraid I'd never live up to him. That your grandma, my wife, would always wish I was him instead of me. That's silly. You're you. Why would she want you to be someone else?" "You know what? You're absolutely right. That is silly." But it hadn't felt silly at the time. It had felt terrifying, impossible, like trying to fill shoes that were 3 sizes too big. One evening, Emma and I were at my mother's house for dinner. The kids were running around outside with Tyler's son. My mother and grandmother were in the kitchen. Richard was at the grill. I went out to join him. "Need help?" I asked. "I've got it, but company is nice." We stood in comfortable silence for a minute, watching him flip burgers. "Richard." "Yeah. I need to tell you something. Something I should have said years ago." "Okay."
I'm sorry.
"For all of it. For making you feel unwelcome. For comparing you to my dad constantly. For that Thanksgiving when I humiliated you in front of everyone. For all the ways I made it clear you were second choice, not good enough, not really family. You didn't deserve any of that. You were grieving. That's an explanation, not an excuse. You were kind and patient, and you loved my mother, and you tried so hard with me and Tyler. And I repaid that by treating you like an interloper. That was wrong. You were protecting your father's memory. My father's memory didn't need protecting. It needed honoring. And honoring him doesn't mean rejecting you. It took me too long to figure that out." Richard set down his spatula and looked at me directly. Do you know what your mother said to me the night before we got married? What? She said, you'll never be their father, but maybe if we're lucky you can be something else. Something just as important but different. And I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but I do now. What are you to us?
I'm Richard.
I'm your mother's husband. I'm the guy who shows up. I'm the person who'll never be your dad but who loves you anyway. And that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. We hugged. And it was the first time it felt completely natural, completely right. That night, after dinner, my mother pulled out old photo albums. It had become a tradition. Looking at pictures, telling stories, making sure the kids knew where they came from. There were pictures of my father. Young, healthy, alive. Pictures of him with my mother, with me as a baby, with Tyler. Pictures of family gatherings, holidays, ordinary moments made precious by his absence. And there were pictures of Richard. Pictures from his wedding to my mother. Pictures of him with Tyler at high school graduation. Pictures of him holding Julia for the first time. Fear and wonder on his face. 2 different lives. 2 different men. But both part of our story. Julia crawled onto my lap. Mama, tell me about my grandfather. The one I never met. What do you want to know? Everything. So I told her. About how he'd coached soccer and made terrible pancakes and sang off-key in the shower. About how he'd loved her grandmother with his whole heart. About how he died too young. Too suddenly, leaving a hole in all of our lives. I wish I'd met him, Julia said. Me too, baby. Me too. But I'm glad I have Grandpa Richard. Me too. Richard, sitting across the room, heard that. I saw his face. Saw the emotion there. Saw him mouth thank you to me. You know what the best part is? Julia said. What's that? I have 2 grandpas. One in heaven and one here. So I'm extra protected. Extra loved. She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And maybe it was. Maybe it took a 6-year-old to see what we adults had struggled with for over a decade. There was room for both. There had always been room for both. We just needed to stop fighting about who belonged and start celebrating everyone who showed up. My father would always be my father. His memory, his legacy, his DNA running through my children. Nothing could change that. Nothing could diminish it. But Richard was family too. Different but equal. Present, loving, committed. And there was room for both. In our hearts, in our homes, in our stories. As I looked around the room that night, at my mother and Richard, still in love after 12 years. At my grandmother, peaceful and content. At Tyler and Sarah with their son. At Emma with our 3 children. At the walls covered with photos of past and present, grief and joy, loss and love. I realized something. I'd spent so many years afraid that moving forward meant leaving my father behind. That making room for Richard meant there'd be less room for my father's memory. But the opposite was true. By making room for Richard, by letting him love us and be loved, we'd actually created more space, more love, more family. My father's legacy wasn't preserved in furniture or photos or rigid adherence to the past. It was preserved in this, in us, in our capacity to love and forgive and grow, in our willingness to be messy and complicated and real with each other, in our ability to say both and instead of either or. That was his real gift to us, not the memories, precious as they were, but the foundation of love he built that was strong enough to hold us all past, present, and future. Strong enough even for Richard, especially for Richard. As I tucked Julia into bed that night, she asked one more question. Mama, do you think your daddy can see us? From heaven. I don't know, baby. I hope so. I think he can. And I think he's happy. Why do you think that? Because everyone's together. Everyone's happy. That's what daddies want most, right? For their families to be happy. Yes, that's exactly what they want. Then he's definitely happy. Because we are. She was right. We were happy. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been simple. But we'd made it through. All of us. Together. And somewhere, somehow, I like to think my father was watching. Proud of the family he'd started. Grateful for the man who'd helped it continue. Peace finally with the way things had turned out. Just like the rest of us.